Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the farm. As I had hoped, we were blessed last night with a little bit of rain, although there was some disparity with the rainfall totals across the farm. Here at the main farmstead, we barely got over 1/10 of an inch of rain, whereas just a half mile south of here, we got close to 1 inch of rain. Regardless though, this should really help our soybean crop as it matures. It'll knock off a lot of those dead leaves, even out the canopy a little bit more so to the south than here at the main farm, but every single rainfall we get helps with this goal. There isn't any field work that needs done. None of our crops are mature enough to harvest or dry enough, but we do have a very pressing issue to address, and that is fixing the door on our 48-foot grain bin that's been buckling. Completing this task is actually incredibly important, with corn harvest being so close and this bin being capable of holding 40 to 45,000 bushels of very heavy test weight corn. We're afraid if we load it to the brim, this door may pop one of these seasons. We'd really prefer to get it fixed before it exponentiates into a bigger problem and we end up with corn all over the ground. I don't know the exact math on it, but I'm sure if this bin popped, it would be thousands and thousands of bushels that we would have to pick up. Before we dive headfirst into this project, make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment down below. It is one of the easiest and cheapest ways that you can support the channel. Every time you interact with the videos, leave a comment, give me any kind of feedback, that helps me out a ton, and I'm certainly appreciative of all of your support. Let's get started. I've talked about this multiple times in the past. This door here on the 48-foot bin is starting to buck a little bit, and we're going to try and brace it with these angle irons. Obviously, replacing the door as a whole would be the best course of action to take for the structural integrity of the bin, but the Superior Bin Co. right there no longer exists, and finding a door that fits this specific type of corrugated metal is actually very hard to do. The nearest one was 3 hours away, and it was going to be about $5,000 all in to put it in, and these angle irons are a lot cheaper and probably just as effective. Although it would have been nice to have one of those doors with the lockdown levers as opposed to having to bolt it shut every year. We're gonna make do though. It's somewhat difficult to see here through the camera, but there's a bow in the middle of those two sections of the bin sheeting. It looks like it's gonna pop out, almost like a fat person in too small clothes. Right there in the middle. Our goal here is to push the hoe up against that a little bit, flatten it and even, drill holes in it, and then install these on both sides. Some pretty thick, I'd say 3/8 an inch, maybe 1/2 inch angle iron.
Right there on a little bit there. Okay, right there. Come in. This way a little bit. Go! In. In the hole, what happened? See? Yeah. In. Forward. Out. Back. Go. Back go. Go. Count your bucket. This way. Count it back this back. Up. Wow. Balance more. Oh, that's good. If you're gentle, you can actually do some pretty delicate work with the backhoe. We folded that in a little bit more. Now we got to start to think about drilling these holes in the door on both sides, putting that up and then securing it. Which when described like that sounds really easy. In theory though, it's not going to be super simple. I do think that once this is attached to the inside of the bin, this thing will be so much sturdier. Go figure though, the 110 volt outlet on this bin that we need to run the power drill isn't working. That's typically the way these projects go. Not to mention that these old grain bins have probably some of the sketchiest electrical wiring I've ever seen. No need to fret though. 3 bins to the north, we have another 110 outlet. Assuming that it works, which is not likely. Only took 200 feet, but whatever you gotta do, you gotta do. You know which hole that was? You just did? Yeah, is it through? Let me go see what other bits I got. I may have to get some new ones.
My dad is very certain that this old Craftsman drill and worn out bit is going to do the job here. Said you probably need a brand new hammer drill and a brand new metal bit to make this work. We've completed 2 out of 36 holes on one piece of angle iron. We've determined what size bolt we need. Dad's going to get a bunch of bolts and washers and nuts, and Jeff and I are going to be sitting here drilling for a while.
Dad's still on a supply run, and Jeff and I have been messing with that darn electric drill for the last 5 minutes. I'm pretty much fed up with it. Dad's too much of a tightwad to get a hammer drill. I'm gonna go find one, or I'm gonna go buy one. Either way though, if we keep using that electric drill, that bit is just spinning in the chuck. It's just a nightmare to do, and it's gonna take us a long time. I'm gonna go find an appropriate tool. Makita isn't my first choice in power tool, but it's one I found at Home Depot, so we're gonna make it work. We made quite a bit of progress, got about 10 or 12 more to drill, and we're waiting on some more bolts to come into our John Deere dealership, but it already feels much more robust. Fortunately, drilling through metal, the faster you go, the slower you go ultimately, because your drill bit gets hot. So you either got to keep it cool, let it cool off, keep it lubricated, or have multiple drill bits. And there's our finished product. A door stout enough to survive a hurricane. The rest of the bin would probably go, but this door shouldn't go anywhere now. These bolts are about the only thing on this bin now that isn't faded and rusty. Should be good for another 40 years. Just wait, this fall when we put corn in it, it'll pop out on the other sides of the door. That's just the way things work, isn't it? There's a lot of things on the farm you can have too much of. Too much rain, too much to drink, too many bills to pay. You can never have too much rock. And I've definitely had enough of this little wash through the drive, so I'm rocking it up. We're gonna fix it so we don't have to keep bouncing around every time we go over this.
Not too shabby if I do say so myself. I could start a landscaping business.
I mean, you're not gonna hire me to manicure 18 holes at Augusta National, but if your lawn at the trailer park needs some work, I'm your guy. There's $1 million idea. Turn all of our farm ground here into a golf course. Start with $1 million, end with nothing. Sounds like a good plan. I'm just sitting here in my truck kind of flabbergasted at how smoothly that bin project went. Usually when our operation is involved in a project like that, we think it's gonna take 4 or 5 hours, and the next thing you know, it's a 3-day project with all sorts of headaches and hassles along the way. We definitely hit this one out of the park. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, you gotta stop and appreciate it. There's someone picking corn. We're gonna take a trek out into one of our cornfields north of town to do some ear testing. We want to kind of see what the moisture is on this corn to see how far away from harvesting it is. Our local elevator, or I guess one of many local elevators, just the closest one in proximity to this field, is possibly going to be offering half-price drying tomorrow. That's usually a pretty good incentive for farmers to harvest grain that's higher in moisture. I don't think it's necessarily worth it to do if your corn's above 20%. But if you're kind of that 20% or below mark, between 20 and 15%, it's really actually a pretty good deal. As some of you may know, we're looking for that 15% moisture range. That's dry corn. Anything above that we have to pay to dry down. They also shrink the bushels down, which wet bushels are just very hydrated, so they have a mathematical calculation to account for all that extra weight. End users don't want to pay for water they don't need. That's why we shrink our bushels, and we have to pay the elevator to dry it down. But when it's half price, sometimes it makes sense to do it. But I should mention, this is all dependent on whether or not our local elevator gets a train in that they're expecting and they want to load with this freshly harvested corn. And of course that our moisture's in the right place. First time I put my sunglasses on today, didn't want to get my eyes gouged out by corn leaves. It helps make your data a little more trustworthy when you actually walk pretty far out in the field. I'd say I'm about 150 or 200 yards in the field. And what I'm seeing out here is actually rather impressive. Got some baseball bat ears. And I'm seeing something that I've seen in almost every cornfield this year, and that is tar spot. All these black looking speckles on these leaves are what is called tar spot, a relatively new disease to the area. I believe it was just found in the United States 4 or 5 years ago. We really don't know a whole lot about it, but it can cause a lot of yield damage if it infects the plants early. This is a late infection, it's not a big deal, but we're seeing so much of it this year. I've not seen a single corn plant this year, regardless of field, hybrid, planting date, that isn't just completely speckled full of tar spot. Definitely something to keep an eye on. What amazes me most about the ear size out in this field is that this is the field that was underwater at the beginning of the season. We had about 5 inches of rainfall here. I really didn't think this crop was going to survive. We didn't replant a single spot out in this field, and it looks like it's thriving. It's surprisingly pleasant out here. Usually I don't enjoy walking out cornfields, but today I guess I'm just in a good mood. For a field with an initial population of 36,000 plants per acre, those are some very impressive ears. This one's impressive, but it's ugly too. Beauty isn't everything. We'll throw it to that side. Let's go see the moisture. That elevator in the distance over there is where we're headed. We're going to take a trip by one of our soybean fields first and see how it looks. Pioneer 31 T65 Enlist beans. I think that's the correct number. Planted the second week of April. Maturing pretty quickly, but not quite as quickly as our 31 A95 Extend beans. I'd say they'll cut next week, but I'd really have to go out there and look to get a better idea. I don't have that kind of time right now. And here we are, Tate & Lyle Coal Station. Pretty big grain facility. We're gonna run inside and use their fancy moisture tester and see exactly where our corn's at. I just ran inside Coal Station here. Those ears rang up at 19.7% moisture and 55.9 pounds per bushel test weight. 19.7% moisture is a little bit higher than I was hoping, because usually you add a point or two to that number to get a realistic idea of what the moisture will be once it goes through the combine. It just always seems to work out that way. 55.9 pounds per bushel test weight doesn't sound that impressive, but you got to remember this is higher moisture corn, so the test weight isn't going to be as heavy. There's a very simple formula to calculating what your test weight will be dry. The first thing you do is take your optimal dry moisture, which is 15, you subtract that from 100, and you get 85. Then you subtract your wet moisture, which is 19.7 from 100, you get 80.3. You take your dry calculation of 85, divide it by 80.3, and you multiply that result by your current test weight at high moisture. We'll run our calculations real quick. Take our dry calculation divided by 80.3, hit equal. We get 1.085 and multiply that by our test weight, 55.9, hit enter. And that calculates up to 59.17 pounds per bushel, which really isn't that great of a number, but I think when we add that couple extra percent of actual moisture in there, we'll have over 60 pound test weight corn. That's a pretty good year. It is really hybrid dependent, but high test weights, especially over 60, is pretty much indicative of a healthy plant. One of the bosses inside of the elevators was pretty confident that they're gonna have that train tonight, so I think we're planning on picking some corn tomorrow. Once you get north of Route 16 onto the really fertile, dark, productive soils, you see a lot more combines running. Darker soils typically tend to dry faster because the plants grow much faster during the season. Or at least that's the way it usually works out. Lighter soils are always wetter. There's a red combine headed to a field. There's a green combine cutting soybeans. Wow. Some of the first soybeans I've seen cut. Just seeing all these combines running has shifted my excitement up to a whole nother gear. I am incredibly thrilled to start getting these combines in the field, see what kind of crop we have. As much as I'd like to keep working, I gotta call it quits early today. I have something else on the agenda. I have to go attend a meeting for a coalition to expand rural broadband access, which is a very important topic for families, farmers, businesses, all sorts of people. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to weigh my opinion on this topic. Everyone, I appreciate you tuning in. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace!